I investigated dog fighting, and I found it to be entirely reprehensible. But in the first half, I want to talk about Alberto Gonzales. Mr. Gonzales is the Attorney General of the United States of America. He came under fire because he fired a bunch of U.S. attorneys in a number of cities, U.S. attorneys who apparently were not politically aligned with the current administration. And joining us here today to talk about the firing of, or the resignation of Alberto Gonzales is Danny Schechter, the news dissector. Danny is a media and government critic and a veteran journalist and co-founder of MediaChannel.org, one of the largest online media issues networks. His latest film is In Debt We Trust, America Before the Bubble Burst, a very topical subject. And his blog is newsdissector.org. Danny, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much. And your new beautiful studios here in Lower Manhattan.
We're getting it together, eh?
Facing, overlooking Ground Zero in a high security building. It took us 20 minutes just to get in.
I know. I was surprised they even allowed you in. You know,
and
aren't you on somebody's watch list right now?
I mentioned your name. A buzzer went off.
So, Danny, you've been critical of the Attorney General and his firing of, not just his firing of the U.S. attorneys, but also the wireless wiretaps, warrantless wiretaps that this administration has promulgated.
Well, I mean, Judge Gonzales replaced John Ashcroft.
Yes.
And basically, it was sort of a continuity of Ashcroft's policies in the Bush administration policies. And he was the Attorney General, the chief law officer in America, and he had been able to appoint vacancies of attorney generals in various states around the country. Now, what one investigation discovered was that a lot of the people who were there but who were not following the political line of the White House, not the constitutional line that the Attorney General was sworn to uphold, found themselves having their jobs threatened or being removed, and for reasons that had nothing to do with their performance. In other words, some instances people had gotten citations saying, look, you're doing a great job here. And then soon they got a letter basically advising that they had to leave, and it was clearly being done as a political purge. And what we're seeing increasingly is it's my way or the highway, which is the approach of this administration.
Either you're with us or you're against us.
To a lot of policies.
Yes.
Gonzales, in a sense, was fronting not for policies he created, but for policies that he was implementing, and they were being enunciated in a higher place at the White House. Now, in a sense, his mentor, the person he was working closely with, Karl Rove, has just stepped down, and now he's followed suit. So we have another high-level administration person leaving his office in the same kind of stealth manner, in which he was, he sort of came in without people knowing much about him, without him saying much about what he really believed, what his values were, and was confirmed in the same way that Supreme Court justices who promised one thing in the confirmation hearings and later show themselves to be really following a political line, a partisan line, not a judicial line. And so here we have Gonzales leaving. This has been a surprise for many people. It happened on Friday. They just sort of made it public today, and he quickly stepped down. He hasn't said much, or at least I don't know what he said, because when I was online, I didn't see any statements that he made. It seemed like another one of these, kind of hush-hush Bush administration, do what I say, and that's it. And Gonzales, had held off testifying. He had the whole Senate upset with him. They wanted to subpoena him. There was lots of suggestions that this was an impeachable offense or close to it in some way. And now he's stepped down. I don't know if this makes him someone who now the Senate can subpoena or can't subpoena. But before, he was being, using the rationale of executive privilege, that he was part of the executive branch and therefore didn't have to answer to anyone, didn't have to be accountable
graciously agreed to stay on board to help with the interviewing. John Goodwin from the Humane Society of the United States. The Humane Society of the United States has decades of experience in prosecuting animal cruelty. It recently announced a newly invigorated animal fighting reward program that offers up to $5,000 for citizens who provide the police with information that leads to the arrest and conviction of people involved in animal fighting. It's the nation's largest animal protection organization, backed by 10 million Americans, or 1 of every 30. It's been around for about 50 years. John Goodwin, welcome to News Talk Online on PalTalk.com.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So let's get to the heart of the case. Michael Vick provides the property where I believe, what was it, his cousin was involved in dog fighting, and I guess actually a police dog was sniffing around and got some evidence in the trunk of a car during a traffic stop, and that led back to the property, and that's how Michael Vick got popped. But the whole issue is, what's a guy like Michael Vick doing, getting his thrills, putting dogs into a ring and fighting them to the death?
Well, that's the $135 million question, and I use that number $135 million because that's what the guy's contract was, and they threw it away so that he could be involved in this criminal underworld of dog fighting. Now, this is something that we'd heard rumors about Michael Vick being involved in going back to 2004. Now he's got his dad saying that when Michael was a young man, he was fighting dogs in the family's garage in Newport News. So this is something that Michael Vick was involved in as a very young man, and he took it with him when he went into the NFL, and he just never left it behind like he should have, and it's potentially been a career killer for him.
So you're involved in the investigation of dog fighting. Can you take our listeners, our audience, through what happens in a dog fight? And I got to warn people in advance, this is pretty disgusting stuff you're about to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in an organized dog fight, people arrange the match usually a couple of months in advance so that they can put the dogs through these extensive exercise regimens. The night of the fight, they're taken to a secret location. Usually most of the spectators don't know where they're going. They might caravan there where only the person in the lead car knows the final destination. The dogs are weighed to make sure that they're the right weight because they're matched to fight at the same size. They bathe them beforehand because to wash off any poison that someone might have put on their fur as a means of cheating in a fight. Then they're put in a box. It's usually a 14 by 14 foot square or 16 by 16 foot square pit or box with 2.5 foot high walls. They release the dogs and they start fighting. And they just maul and destroy each other. They shred each other's muzzles. They break legs. They leave puncture wounds all over their opponent's body. The fights usually last 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Some take as long as 3 hours. And it's a vicious, vicious spectacle.
And oftentimes, John Goodwin from the Humane Society of the United States, it's a fight to the death.
Yeah, oftentimes it is. A lot of the time, the losing dog will die in the pit or afterwards from the injuries. And anytime a dog just quits and decides that he has had enough, that dog almost certainly is going to be executed by the dog fighter, because the whole point of their breeding operations is to breed the winners so that they, with the intent being that you produce dogs that have a higher level of what they call gameness, the willingness to keep fighting even when they're suffering debilitating injuries and they're in severe pain. And so, for that reason, they execute the losers. And we saw descriptions of that in the indictment against Michael Vick. Dogs were tested out in little practice fights, and if they didn't demonstrate enough aggression, enough willingness to fight even when hurt,